When the Fed uses massive power, what happens next? Let's look at the crisis, criticisms, and the legal evolution that got us here. So there was 3 watershed moments that shows the Fed's reach. The Great Depression and the 1930s, the emergency lending grows, section 13.3, added in 1932. 2008, unprecedented emergency facilities and huge QE programs to stabilize markets and banks. 2020, massive rapid interventions, massive QE, corporate credit support, municipal liquidity, and the Fed enters markets it hadn't before. Each crisis expanded the Fed's toolkit and its balance sheet. Alright, so here are the 3 main criticisms of the Fed, each with real mechanisms behind it. Democratic accountability and secrecy. The Fed holds enormous power, but is only partially in control of political checks. Critics point to the limited oversight of some emergency actions and argue policymakers need clearer democratic constraints. When the Fed expands its balance sheet, buying assets, liquidity often flows into financial markets. That stabilizes prices, but tends to raise asset prices and concentrate gains in asset owners, making distributional effects real and measurable. Moral hazard and bailouts. Frequent backstops teach big firms that they're too important to fail, which increases risk-taking. That's the moral hazard problem that critics warn about, because they always have the good old tax base to bail them out. Regulatory capture and concentration. The Fed works closely with big banks and primary dealers. The proximity risks capture, policy design can be skewed towards the interests of the large institutions it supervises and trades with. Legally, the Fed started as a regional compromise in 1913. Here are the major key changes. 1917, wartime flexing of monetary policy. 1932, section 13.3, emergency lending. And what that does is it leaves the word emergency very subjective. But then that leaves into question what constitutes an emergency and who gets to decide that emergency. 1935, Banking Act, centralized policy and created the modern FOMC. 1946 and 1977, employment goals and a dual mandate. And then 2010, Dodd-Frank, new supervisory roles and added transparency, but also new responsibilities. Bottom line, the Fed's scope has grown step by step. Congress can change it at any time, but it's an accumulation of law, crisis, and patience, and practice. The Fed can stabilize liquidity and blunt recessions, but it can't fix structural problems like productivity, demographics, or poor public investment. When monetary policy is asked to do everything, responsibility drifts away from elected institutions into technocratic hands. That trade-off is at the heart of this debate. If you think the Fed has too much power like I do, some possible reforms can include stronger congressional oversight and much clearer reporting requirements for emergency facilities, limits or clearer triggers on certain balance sheet operations, rules that reduce institutional bias, more transparency about design policy, more transparency about decision inputs, rotating governance reforms, or even a reallocation of some functions back to elected bodies. Any change requires law. Congress sets the Fed's mandate. The Federal Reserve shaped modern markets and stabilized crises, but it's a powerful institution with real trade-offs. If you care about who controls money, the conversation matters about law, oversight, and democratic accountability. If you like this Part 2 explainer, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and I'll see you in the next video.